Rain poured down from the black sky, turning the dirt streets into rivers of mud. The wind was sharp and cold, slicing through the night like invisible blades. Most people had locked their doors, warm fires burning inside, ignoring the world. Beyond their walls, but out there, alone in the storm, an alien girl crawled through the filth. Her hair was wet and tangled, her skin pale from hunger. One of her legs was gone. Only a rough bandage covered the place where it used to be. Every move made her wince in pain, but she kept crawling forward. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she had to keep moving. She reached the light of a small house and looked up. Through the window, she saw a family eating together, laughing. For a moment, her heart warmed at the sight. But then the father noticed her in the dark and quickly pulled the curtains. The door slammed shut, and she was left in the cold again. Her stomach growled so loud she could hear it over the rain. She had not eaten in days, maybe weeks. The last time she had real food was before the soldiers came to her village. She didn't want to think about that night, but the memories came anyway. The fire, the screams, the smell of smoke. And then the pain when they took her leg. She pulled herself toward an old broken wall. It had a piece of roof still hanging over it. At least it would block some of the rain. Her arms trembled as she dragged herself under it and sat down. Her breath was shaky, her body shivering. She hugged herself and closed her eyes, whispering, "Just let me sleep. Just let me forget." Her eyes were almost shut when she heard footsteps. At first, she thought it was her imagination. But the sound grew louder, splash in water, heavy boots. Her heart raced. If it was the patrol, they would arrest her. Or worse, she pressed herself against the wall. Trying to be invisible, a shadow moved in the rain. Tall and broad, the figure stopped a few steps away. She could see his boots now, dark, muddy, human-made. The man slowly crouched down so his face came into view. He had short, dark hair, a worn jacket, and eyes that didn't look cruel. But she had learned not to trust eyes. "What happened to you?" he asked, his voice calm but serious. She didn't answer. Instead, she glared at him, expecting him to laugh or call the guards or walk away. But he didn't. Instead, he shrugged off his jacket and held it out to her. "You'll freeze too. Death if you stay like this," he said. She narrowed her eyes. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "Because you're alive," he replied simply. She almost laughed, but it came out as a cough. Alive? She didn't feel alive. She felt like a ghost left to rot in the rain. He didn't push her. He just stayed there, waiting. The rain dripped from his hair, but he didn't seem to mind. Finally, she shook her head. "If you help me, you'll be in trouble," she warned. "Aliens like me aren't welcome here." "I know," he said. "Come on, my place is close. You can warm up, then decide what to do." She stared at him, unsure if this was real or some cruel trap. But her body was shaking so hard now she could barely think. When he gently placed the jacket over her shoulders, the warmth hit her like a wave. It smelled of wood smoke and something she couldn't name. Safety. Maybe. He stood and offered his hand. She looked at it for a long time before reaching out. When his fingers wrapped around hers, she felt how strong he was, in one smooth motion. He lifted her into his arms. She gasped, startled by how easily he carried her. No one's done this for me," she whispered. He didn't reply, only started walking through the rain. The world blurred past as she rested her head against his chest. She could hear the steady beat of his heart. For the first time in a long time, she let her eyes close, not from exhaustion, but from a strange, fragile comfort. The rain still fell, the wind still howled. But the cold didn't bite as sharply anymore. She didn't know his name, and he didn't know hers. Yet something in the way he carried her told her one thing. For tonight, she wasn't alone, and in the dark streets of a world that had turned its back on her, that small truth felt like the first spark of hope she had known in years. The sound of the rain was softer now, muffled by the roof above. She didn't open her eyes at first, unsure if she was dreaming. When she finally looked, she saw a small, dimly lit cabin, wooden walls, A stone fireplace glowing with orange light, and the smell of burning pine in the air. The human man set her gently on a chair near the fire. Steam rose from her wet clothes. He knelt down, his eyes scanning the rough bandage on her missing leg. "You're freezing," he said. "We'll get you warm first." She held the jacket tighter around her. Her voice was faint. "Why am I here?" "Because you needed help," he answered, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. She frowned. "You don't know me," she said. "You don't know what I've done." He looked up at her, his face calm. "I don't need to know." He replied, "I just know no one should be left out there in the storm." Her eyes narrowed. "You'll get in trouble," she said again, her voice sharper this time. "Harboring an alien like me is against the law here." He didn't flinch. "I've been in trouble before," he said. "I'll survive." She didn't understand this man. Humans in this settlement avoided her kind. Some feared them, some hated them, but none welcomed them. Why? She asked finally, "Why risk yourself for me?" His answer was quiet. "Because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing." She didn't know how to reply. The fire crackled, filling the silence. Her body was slowly warming, but her mind refused to relax. Her life had taught her that kindness always had a price, and she feared his price would be more than she could give when he handed her a steaming cup. She stared at it suspiciously. "It's just tea," he said, smiling faintly. Her fingers were stiff, but she took the cup and sipped. The warmth spread through her like sunlight breaking into a cold room. After a while she asked, "What's your name?" "Daniel," he replied. "And you?" She hesitated, then muttered, "Lyra." It had been so long since she'd told anyone her name, it felt strange in her mouth. Daniel set a small loaf of bread on the table, along with a bowl of stew. Her stomach growled instantly, but she still didn't move. "You can eat," he said. "It's not poisoned." She looked at him sharply. "How do you know I was thinking that?" "Because I've met survivors before," he said softly. "They all expect the worst." She took the bread slowly. The first bite made her eyes sting, not from the heat, but from something else. She tried to hide it, but Daniel saw. He didn't say anything, just went back to adding wood to the fire. After eating, she leaned back in the chair, her body heavy with exhaustion. Daniel moved to a small wooden chest, pulling out clean clothes and a thick blanket. "These should fit you," he said. "You can change behind that curtain." She glanced toward the corner where the curtain hung. She didn't move. "You trust me enough to give me your things?" she asked. "I trust you enough to help," he replied simply. She went behind the curtain and changed. The clothes were worn but soft, smelling faintly of pine and smoke. When she came out, Daniel was tending to a pot over the fire. He glanced at her leg and said, "We'll change the bandage before you sleep." She tensed. "No," she said quickly. "I can do it myself." "You can't," he replied. "Not in your state." Her voice turned cold. "I don't want to owe you anything." Daniel looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Then don't," he said. "Consider this payment for the tea you drank." Something in his tone made her pause. It wasn't pity, and it wasn't control. It was normal, like he wasn't treating her as a burden or a danger. Reluctantly, she let him unwrap the bandage. The wound was old, but still raw. He worked gently, his hands steady. She didn't flinch, not from the pain, but from the unfamiliar feeling of someone caring. When he finished, he tied a fresh cloth around the stump. "There," he said. "Better than before." She didn't thank him, but she didn't push him away either. For now, she stayed by the fire, staring into the flames. Daniel sat across from her, not asking questions, not forcing her to speak. The silence was almost peaceful, until a loud knock shattered it. Both their heads turned toward the door. Daniel's expression hardened instantly. "That's the patrol," he whispered. "Don't make a sound." Lyra's blood ran cold. Her mind raced, her eyes darting toward the back door. But Daniel shook his head. "Too risky," he murmured. "Follow me." He led her to a section of the floor near the table. Lifting a wooden panel, he revealed a small dark space beneath. "In," he said. "Now." She hesitated for only a second before climbing down. The wood closed above her, plunging her into darkness. Her heart pounded as the sound of boots echoed outside. The knocking came again, harder this time. From above, she heard Daniel's voice. Calm, steady, lying to the men who wanted her gone, and for the first time, she realized maybe this man wasn't just sheltering her from the storm. Maybe he was willing to fight the whole world to keep her safe. The patrol's voices faded into the distance. The sound of their boots splashing in the muddy streets slowly disappeared. Only then did Daniel lift the wooden panel and help Lyra climb out from the hiding place. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold this time, but from the rush of fear. They could have found me, she whispered, her voice unsteady. They didn't, Daniel said firmly, and they won't, as long as I'm here. She didn't answer, but her eyes stayed on him a little longer this time. There was something strange about this man. He didn't speak like other humans she'd met. No threats, no orders, no demands, just quiet certainty. Daniel moved back toward the table. "You didn't finish eating earlier," he said, "and I think you need more than bread." He ladled stew from the pot into a deep bowl and set it in front of her. Steam curled up, carrying the smell of meat, vegetables and herbs. Lyra froze, her stomach twisted in hunger. But her mind hesitated. "It's safe," Daniel said, noticing her doubt. "I made it myself." She picked up the spoon slowly. The first sip burned her tongue slightly. It was thick, warm, and rich, flavor she had almost forgotten. Her hand trembled as she took another spoonful, and another. The warmth spread through her chest, chasing away the cold that had lived in her bones for months. Daniel said nothing while she ate. He just sat on the other side of the table, sipping tea. She realized he was giving her space, not watching her like she was some strange creature. By the time she set the empty bowl down, her eyelids felt heavy, not from exhaustion alone, but from the comfort of being full for the first time in weeks. She sat back, her hand resting on her bandaged leg. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why do you care if I live or die?" Daniel's gaze lifted to meet hers. "Because I've seen too many people turned away when they needed help," he said. She studied him for a moment. "You've lost someone," she guessed. His jaw tightened slightly. "Yes," he said. Simply, a long time ago. She didn't press him. Some wounds were too deep for questions. Instead, she looked around the cabin. It was small, one room for living, another for sleeping, and shelves stacked with tools and supplies. It was the kind of place that felt lived in, safe, and for a dangerous fleeting moment. She imagined staying. Daniel stood and began clearing the table. Lyra's instincts told her to offer help, to do something so she wouldn't feel like a burden. But before she could speak, he turned toward her. "There's a bed in the other room," he said. "You should rest." "I'll sleep here," she said quickly, glancing at the chair by the fire. "It's warmer there," he replied, "and more comfortable." Her brow furrowed. "You don't trust me to stay out of your things?" He chuckled lightly. "I don't have anything worth stealing," he said. "Besides, I trust you enough." That word again, trust, it didn't make sense. No one trusted her before, not even her own people after she lost her leg. But here was a human, offering her food, shelter, and a bed, without asking for anything back. She followed him to the small room. The bed was simple, covered in thick blankets. The smell of pine was stronger here, mixed with the faint scent of smoke from the fireplace. She touched the blanket cautiously, feeling the softness under her fingers. It had been years since she slept anywhere but on the ground or cold metal floors. Daniel set a small lantern on the table beside the bed. "If you need anything, I'll be in the other room," he said. Lyra looked at him. "And if I leave?" she asked. "Then I hope you find somewhere safe." He replied without hesitation. That answer unsettled her more than if he had tried to stop her. When he left, she sat on the edge of the bed. Her mind wouldn't rest. Not yet, she remembered. The last place she stayed, A filthy storage crate on the edge of the city. The rain had leaked through the roof, soaking her while she tried to sleep. That night, the patrol had found her and dragged her out. She'd barely escaped, crawling through alleys until she reached this side of the settlement. Her fingers gripped the blanket tighter. Why was this? Human different? And what would happen when the patrols came again? She lay down, the warmth of the blankets wrapping around her like an embrace. Her eyelids grew heavier. She didn't want to close them. Part of her feared that if she slept, she'd wake to find it was all a dream. The fire, the food, the kindness. But sleep pulled her under anyway. In the other room, Daniel sat by the fire, staring into the flames. He could hear the faint sound of her breathing from the bedroom. Steady and calm. It had been a long time since his cabin felt less empty. He knew this was dangerous, keeping her here, hiding her from the patrols. But as he listened to the quiet in the storm outside, he made his choice. Whatever came next, he wasn't going to let her go back to the streets, not while she still had a chance to live. Morning came slow, with a pale light filtering through the curtains. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and shining. Daniel was already awake, chopping wood outside while the smell of fresh tea filled the cabin. Lyra sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the clean clothes he'd given her. She could hear the steady sound of the axe hitting wood. It was strangely calming, a rhythm she hadn't heard in years. For a moment, she let herself imagine this was normal life. No soldiers, no hiding, no fear. But the peace didn't last. A faint rumble echoed in the distance. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of engines, the kind she had learned to fear. Her heart began to race. Daniel came inside, setting the chopped wood near the fireplace. He saw her tense expression. Immediately, "They're coming?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Patrol," she said, her voice tight. "I've heard that sound too many times." Daniel didn't panic. Instead, he moved quickly, shutting the windows and dimming the lantern light. They shouldn't have a reason to search here again so soon, he said. "But we'll be ready." Before she could ask what he meant, the sound grew louder, the heavy hum of 2 patrol trucks stopping in front of the cabin. Boots hit the ground, splashing in puddles. Then came the knock, sharp, heavy, and full of authority. Daniel glanced at her. "Back under the floor," he whispered. She hesitated. "They'll search better this time," she warned. "I'll handle it," he said, his voice steady. "Go now." She moved quickly to the table, lifting the wooden panel and lowering herself into the dark space. Her breathing was fast, her hands gripping the cold floorboards above her. She could hear the boots right outside the door. Another knock shook the wood, followed by a voice, "Open up. Patrol inspection." Daniel opened the door slowly. 2 soldiers stepped in, dripping with rainwater. Their eyes scanned the small cabin, sharp and suspicious. "What's the reason for this visit?" Daniel asked calmly. "Routine check," one soldier said. "We've had reports of illegal alien movement near this area." Daniel didn't flinch. "I haven't seen anyone," he replied. "Just me out here." The other soldier began walking through the room, his eyes searching every corner. He moved toward the shelf, running his hand over the tools. Daniel watched him closely but kept his tone casual. "Still raining in the city?" he asked. The soldier didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the bedroom and stepped inside. Lyra's heart pounded harder from her hiding spot. She could see the soldier's boots moving across the wooden floor just above her. Every creak made her flinch. She imagined him pulling up the floorboards and dragging her out. The soldier came back into the main room. "This place is too quiet," he said to his partner. "Feels like something's off." Daniel crossed his arms. "Maybe it's quiet because I like it that way," he said. "I live alone for a reason." The first soldier stepped closer to him. "If we find you hiding someone, you know the penalty," he warned. Daniel didn't look away. "I know the penalty for lying," he said, "and I'm not lying." For a tense moment, no one moved. The soldiers studied him, perhaps trying to read his face. Finally, the second soldier gave a short nod. "Let's go," he muttered. They stepped outside, boots splashing in the puddles again. A moment later, the sound of the engines roared back to life, fading into the distance. Daniel waited until the noise was gone before kneeling by the table. He lifted the panel and Lyra crawled out, her face pale. "They're going to come back," she said, her voice shaking. "Probably," Daniel admitted. "They're getting suspicious." She looked at him. "Why risk it again? Why not just hand me over?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because you've already been through enough." She wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she sank into the chair, her hands gripping the edges as if to ground herself. Daniel poured her a cup of tea and set it in front of her. She stared at the steam curling upward, thinking of how close she had been to being caught. That night, neither of them slept much. Every sound outside made her tense. Every creak of the wood made her listen. And yet, in the quiet moments between fear, she began to realize something. Daniel wasn't just giving her shelter, he was standing between her and the world that wanted her gone. It was a dangerous thing to do, and yet, a part of her couldn't stop wondering why. The morning after the patrol's visit was colder than usual. Frost clung to the edges of the window, and Lyra could see her breath when she spoke. Daniel was already moving about, gathering tools from a shelf. The steady sound of metal clinking together filled the cabin. "What are you doing?" she asked from the chair near the fire. Daniel glanced at her with a faint smile. "Starting something important," he said. "You need a leg, Lyra. I'm going to make one." She froze. The words didn't sink in at first. No one had ever offered her that before. Her mind immediately pushed back. "You can't," she said, shaking her head. "It's too hard. And even if you could, why would you waste your time?" Daniel crouched beside the chair, his voice steady. "Because you need it." "And because I can." She didn't answer. Part of her wanted to believe him, but another part, the part that had survived this long, told her not to trust hope. He went outside, returning with scrap metal, wires, and old mechanical parts. The table became a workshop. Pieces of wood, gears, and springs spread out like a puzzle. The smell of oil and the faint heat from the fire mixed in the air. Lyra watched him for a long time. His hands were steady, moving with a confidence that told her this wasn't his first time building something. "What did you do before all this?" she asked finally. "I fixed things," he said simply. "Machines, tools. Sometimes people's mistakes." That last part made her curious. "Mistakes?" she asked. Daniel didn't look up. "Sometimes a broken thing isn't just metal," he said. "Sometimes it's a person who needs another chance." She didn't know why, but his words stayed in her mind. For the rest of the morning, she sat quietly watching him measure, cut, and shape the parts. The sharp sound of his tools was oddly comforting. It felt safe. Around midday, Daniel slid a small plate of bread toward her. "You'll need to eat if you want to walk again," he said. She took it without protest this time, chewing slowly. Her eyes kept going back to the table, where the shape of something new was beginning to form. By evening, the frame of the prosthetic was almost complete. It wasn't beautiful, but it was sturdy, strong enough to hold her weight. Daniel set it aside and began working on the harness that would attach it to her leg. "This part has to be right," he explained. "If it doesn't fit well, it'll hurt more than it helps." She hesitated before speaking. "What if I can't use it? What if I fail?" Daniel looked at her. "Then we try again," he said simply. "And again, until it works." No one had ever said that to her before. Her people believed weakness was permanent. Once you were broken, you stayed broken. But here was a human, speaking as if failure was just a step toward success. That night, while Daniel cleaned his tools, she sat closer to the fire. She thought about what it would be like to stand again, to walk without crawling or being carried. The thought scared her almost as much as it excited her. Just before they both turned in, Daniel placed a blanket over her shoulders. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll try it on." His tone carried no doubt, and somehow a small part of her began to believe him. But the peace of the evening was short-lived. As the wind picked up outside, Lyra caught sight of movement through the window. Two shadows passed near the edge of the forest. Too far to see clearly, but too close to be a coincidence. Her chest tightened. "The patrol," she whispered. Daniel's jaw tensed, but he didn't move toward the door. "They might just be passing," he said. Though his eyes stayed fixed on the window, neither of them slept deeply that night. The sound of the wind carried faint echoes of boots on wet ground. Every creak in the wood made Lyra's hand tighten on the blanket. Yet in the middle of that tension, she kept looking toward the table, at the half-finished leg. It wasn't just a piece of metal and wood. It was a promise. When dawn broke, Daniel was already awake, tightening bolts and adjusting straps. He looked tired but determined. "Ready?" he asked. Lyra swallowed hard, her voice low. "I've been ready for this for a long time." The sun had barely climbed above the treetops when the sound came. Engines. Loud and close, much closer than before. Lyra froze halfway through. Her first step with the new leg strapped to her body. Daniel's head snapped toward the window. This time there was no doubt. "They're here," he said quietly. She looked down at the prosthetic he had just finished adjusting. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was hers. Her heart raced. "I can run now," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "They'll have the forest surrounded." "We need another plan." The engine stopped outside, followed by the heavy slam of vehicle doors. Boots hit the ground in unison. There were more of them this time, not 2, but 6, and their voices carried an authority that made Lyra's stomach twist. Daniel moved quickly, pulling open the hatch in the floor. "Hide," he said. But she didn't move. "They'll tear the place apart," she argued. "They'll find me anyway." The knock came, heavy, angry, shaking the wooden door on its hinges. "Open up. This is a full inspection." Daniel's jaw tightened. He leaned closer to her, his voice low but sharp. "If we're going to get out, you have to trust me." She nodded, though her hands trembled. The knocking turned into pounding. Then came the sound of wood splintering. They were forcing the door open. Daniel grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back of the cabin. There was a narrow storage door that opened to the outside. Hidden behind stacks of firewood, they slipped out into the biting cold. The wet ground crunched under their feet as they moved around the side of the cabin. From here, Lyra could see the patrol trucks parked out front, their headlights cutting through the mist. The soldiers were inside now, shouting as they searched the main room. Daniel led her toward the tree line, but a voice called out from behind them. "There! Stop!" Lyra's heart leapt into her throat. 2 soldiers had spotted them and were already running their way. Daniel grabbed a fallen branch, swinging it to slow the first soldier. The man stumbled, giving them precious seconds. "Go!" Daniel shouted. Lyra pushed forward, the new leg awkward but faster than crawling. She could hear Daniel's footsteps right behind hers. Branches whipped at her face as they pushed deeper into the forest. Shouts erupted behind them. More soldiers joined the chase. A warning shot cracked through the air, the sound echoing through the trees. Lyra's breathing turned ragged. The leg was holding, but every step sent a jolt of pain through her. They reached a fallen log blocking the path. Daniel vaulted over it easily, then turned and offered his hand to her. She took it, and he pulled her up and over. The moment her feet hit the ground, another shout rang out, this one splintering the wood beside them. "They're trying to hit us," she gasped. "They're trying to scare us into slowing down," Daniel replied. His voice was steady, but his eyes were scanning the forest for somewhere to hide. Up ahead, the ground dipped into a narrow gully. Daniel pulled her into it, using the slope as cover. They crouched low, the sound of boots crashing through the forest above them. The soldiers were close, too close. Lyra's chest heaved. Her mind raced through every possible escape she had ever tried in the past. None of them had worked. Until now, she wasn't alone this time. Daniel leaned close. "When I say run, you run as fast as you can. Don't look back." She shook her head. "I'm not leaving you." His eyes locked with hers. "Then you better keep up," he suddenly grabbed a fist-sized rock and hurled it into the trees to their left. The sound drew the soldiers away for a moment, their shouts echoing in that direction. "Now!" Daniel hissed. They burst from the gully, moving in the opposite direction. The cold air burned Lyra's lungs, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She could hear the soldiers realizing the trick and turning back. The chase was on again, finally. The trees began to thin. Ahead was an old, weather-beaten hunting cabin, abandoned and half-hidden under vines. Daniel yanked the door open and pulled her inside. Dust swirled in the dim light. The air was thick and stale, but it was shelter. They pressed their backs against the wall, outside. The sound of the patrol faded in and out as they searched the forest. For now, they had slipped away. Lyra leaned against the wall, clutching the edge of the new leg. "It worked," she whispered. "If I didn't have this, I'd still be crawling." Daniel nodded, his breathing heavy but controlled. "That's why I made it," he said, "so you could keep moving when it mattered." She looked at him, really looked at him, and felt the weight of what had just happened. He could have left her when the patrol came. He could have handed her over and walked away. But he hadn't. Instead, he had chosen to run into danger. With her, outside, the forest was quiet again, but they both knew it wouldn't stay that way. The forest was still damp from the last night's rain. A thin fog curled between the trees, hiding their tracks as Daniel led Lyra deeper into the wilderness. They had left the abandoned hunting cabin before sunrise. It wasn't safe to stay in one place for too long, not with patrols searching the area. Lyra's new leg creaked faintly as they walked. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. She was still getting used to its weight and balance, but each step felt less strange than the one before. Daniel kept his pace steady so she could keep up. Every so often, he'd glance back to check on her. "Are you tired?" he asked quietly. "Not yet," she said, though her breath was heavier than she wanted to admit. She didn't want him to think she was weak. Not after everything he'd done. Hours passed, the trees giving way to rolling hills covered in tall grass. From the top of one hill, Daniel stopped and pointed ahead. Nestled at the edge of a valley was a small cabin, older than the one they had left. Its roof sagged in places, and vines crawled up the walls, but smoke still rose from its chimney. Faint but steady. "Someone lives there?" Lyra asked. "Not anymore," Daniel said. "I kept it hidden for years. A backup place, in case I ever needed to disappear." They reached the cabin by midday. The inside was dusty, the furniture old, but the walls were strong and the roof kept the rain out. It smelled of wood and earth. Lyra stepped inside slowly, her eyes scanning the space. It wasn't much, but it felt different. It felt safe. Daniel set down the supplies they had carried and started cleaning the hearth. Within minutes, a fire crackled in the stone fireplace, warming the room. Lyra sank into the nearest chair. Her legs, both the real one and the new one, ached from the long walk, but the warmth and quiet wrapped around her like a blanket. "Do you think they'll find us here?" she asked, her voice low. Daniel looked into the fire for a moment before answering. "Not if we're careful. This place is far from the roads, and there's no easy way to reach it." She studied his face. He didn't look like a man running from the law. He looked like someone who had made peace with his choice, and that choice was keeping her alive. As the afternoon light faded, Daniel brought in water from a nearby stream. Lyra helped sort through the supplies, separating the tools, food, and blankets. It felt strange, working together like this, but it was a good strange. For the first time since her village fell, she wasn't surviving alone. Over the next few days, they made the cabin livable. Daniel fixed a broken shutter, patched the roof, and set traps in the woods for small game. Lyra practiced walking with the prosthetic every morning. At first, she stumbled often, frustrated by her slowness. But Daniel was patient, always telling her, "Every step is progress." One morning, she managed to walk from the cabin to the edge of the stream without falling. Once, she turned to him, a small smile breaking across her face. "I'm getting faster," she said. He grinned. "You're getting stronger." That night, they sat by the fire eating roasted rabbit. The forest outside was quiet, only the sound of crickets breaking the stillness. Lyra stared into the flames. Her voice soft. "When I was in the streets, I used to dream about a place like this," she said, "but I stopped believing it was possible." Daniel didn't look away from the fire. "Sometimes you find home in unexpected places," he said, "and sometimes you build it yourself." The words settled deep in her chest. For so long, she had thought of herself as broken, someone without a future. Now, sitting here with a man who had risked everything for her, she felt something she hadn't dared to feel in years: hope. Before they went to sleep, she stood in the doorway, looking out at the dark forest. Somewhere out there, the patrols were still searching. But here, in this hidden valley, she felt untouchable, safe, at least for now. She turned back to Daniel, who was setting another log on the fire. "You didn't have to save me," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." Her throat tightened. "Then I'll stay," she said, the decision surprising even herself. Daniel nodded once. "No questions, no conditions." "Then this is your home now too," he said. The firelight flickered across the walls. The wind whispered through the trees outside. And for the first time in years, Lyra lay down in a bed without fear pressing against her chest. The world beyond the forest might still be dangerous, but here, in this small cabin, she had a roof, a fire, a new leg, and someone who refused to let her face the darkness alone. And in the quiet warmth of the night, she realized something. Simple and unshakable, she had no home, no leg, no hope. Until the day a human invited her inside. Now, she had all three.